floor is yours, and you have 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Let me start directly from migration. This is the phenomena that we have since the dissolution of Soviet Union, when the international mobility became possible, and now it has a big scale. The migration is excessive, and this phenomena is still taking place in Ukraine. But the whole world is becoming closer, and still more and more people started to move to other countries. And now it's about 214 million people living outside their places of origin, of birth. And it's about 3% of their world population. And Ukrainian people taking an active part in those flows, and Ukraine represents a country of origin, transit and destination because of its geographical position. It's in between the west and east, and a lot of people using it like transit country when the flows coming from Russia and other, like in Central Asia, and people planning to move forward to the Western countries. Okay. We can observe that international migration and development becoming complex and contextual issues. And of course, migration can be a part and important engine of development, but if it's managed, if the country can manage it in a proper and efficient way. Migration and human security also, they are multidimensional and organic in nature and linked with each other. Like we can see that an example of Armenia, and it's very similar to Ukrainian case, that people are moving from the country of origin not because of the good life, but because they are looking for the better one. And the positive effects are pretty much the same in Ukraine, for Ukraine, as for the Armenia. It's first of all, migrants want to improve their financial situation. They want to improve the lives of their families, and of course they can do it thanks to remittances. But as the experience shows that migrants, they are more adaptable after they coming back from the abroad. They more easily to adapt to new conditions, and they have this international knowledge, and they can apply it at home country, and they have more opportunities for employment. Of course, the benefit is that migrants increasing their linguistic competence and communication skills. Also, they expand their cultural horizons and intercultural tolerance. We can see that those people who lived abroad sometimes, they are more tolerant to foreigners, and they accept new ideas and new traditions easily than those who never have been abroad. It's also the way to promote political literacy and responsibility of the people. So we can see that migration indeed have a lot of advantages, and it is useful, and it can be part of the development, and it can be an engine of development. But it also has a lot of negative effects. First of all, it's decline in health conditions, fertility of married couples, emotional ties between families, because they are weakened. It is also damage of pedagogical and nurturing potential of the family. And another, also the same common problem for developing countries is a brain drain when qualified workers and high-skilled specialists going abroad and leaving their country. It is good when they coming back, but usually when they lived abroad for some time and sometimes they even come back home, but when they found no change and they cannot apply their knowledge and the experience in the home country, they usually go back abroad again. So another negative effect of migration is irregular migration, which increases the risk of exploitation and human rights violations. It has a lot of other negative effects, like different diseases are coming with those people who have irregular statuses, and the violation of laws also happens in the country, and so on. Personally, I agree with the opinion that migration can be sometimes a temporary cure, maybe a remedy, but it's not a solution of the problem. It's not the way out for sending countries, and they need to find other solutions, maybe to improve the economy, to improve the social and other political lives, and so on, in order to make people, to inspire people to stay in the country or to go back home. I have some data, statistics on migration, and you can see that in Ukraine the biggest number of immigrants is from Russia and other post-Soviet countries like Moldova, Uzbekistan, Armenia, Georgia, and so on. And if in the 90s Ukraine was pretty much a country of emigration, people were going abroad, then since 2005 more people immigrating in the country. So we have the positive saldo of immigration. Here is some numbers on illegal migrants detected by the institutions. We can see that it's a positive tendency. The number of illegal migrants goes down. This is the people migrating from Ukraine. And it also, the positive tendency as according to official statistics, less and less people go abroad. But to some statistics it is not so, and still there are a lot of people who live in country forever. And here again, the main countries of destinations of Ukrainian people, and here is the map where usually Ukrainian people go to find their work. It's our neighbors, Poland and Czech Republic, and it's like historically that people from Ukraine go a lot to Italy, Greece, Spain and Portugal. Distribution according to economic activity, it's mainly agriculture, then industry, construction, trade and others. And the main areas to be developed in Ukraine is, of course, the protection of rights of labor migrants abroad, development of employment programs abroad, attracting foreign workers to Ukraine, and creation of conditions for the return of Ukrainian laborers, which, as I said, can contribute to the economy of country a lot. And there was the request to mention, to speak about the disadvantages and maybe some data limitations that we faced during preparing our case studies. And for me, it was contradictions, a lot of contradictions between available official migration on data and estimates on the real size of migration. It's different, for example, statistics of the UN differs a lot from the national Ukrainian statistics. And also another difficulties, like for scientists who measure the migration, it's difference in terms, what is different opinion on what is international migrants, what is foreign nationals, foreign students, labor migrants, and etc. If there was some common definitions for all, it would be much easier to calculate different types of the migrants. That's it.
Thank you very much, Iuliia. It was quite interesting, and I think it's partially, it's quite similar to what Ani told about official and unofficial statistics about number of migrants. So let's discuss it, because it's for us. I was doing similar research in Moldova, and when we started, it was it was estimations of number of migrants which ran between 200,000 and 2 million, and it's not estimation there. Yes. So we could discuss how we. So now it's Elena. 10 minutes.
It was a lot to represent about advantages and disadvantages, positive, negative effects. What I'm going to do, it's not that complicated, but it seems. I try to analyze regional distribution, internal regional distribution migration in Ukraine, and how it was correlated with Human Development Index. Because you will see that we have the balance of internal migrations much more higher than external. At least statistical, available statistic, official, says us this. And we also, I have a possibility to check AGI that this was correctly calculated for our country, and you'll see like a lot of dimensions. And according to the dimensions, we could analyze what actually was the problems for migration. So here is just some challenges, because why it's a very alarming problem of migrations, because we still have a slight population reduction. We have a really increasing burden on economically active people from those who are green and those who are retired. So you will see also the balance of migration. We have still victims of trafficking and asylum seekers, but that is mainly related to external one. So here is the trend. You see how the population reduced actually. Here is you see that starting from 2004 we have a balance, positive balance of external migration. But what we see now, it's official statistics in 2009. Please watch the first row. So you see the balance of external, it's really low, and internal. So in my calculation, actually I was based on statistic, because I think it's more important, and I tried to find out why people migrate within the region. According to general balance of migration, I chose 4 regions with the most highest negative balance of migration. And it was Donetsk, Kirovohrad, Lugansk, and Zhytomyr region. Maybe it will be, it will be easier for you. Here is Ukraine, and so here is those regions: Lugansk, Donetsk, Kirovohrad, and Zhytomyr. Lugansk and Donetsk and Kirovohrad, they have very low HDI. Zhytomyr just low. So actually, it's you think it's normal. So people like have all the not rights, but have the reasons to emigrate. But why? Because Donetsk and Lugansk, they are together with maybe Dnipropetrovsk and Kharkiv, all the eastern regions, they are like an engine for our economy in the industrial sense. So, and it still have like good wages, but anyway, we'll see. So we have national HDI that was calculated, and it includes 9 dimensions. Here is demographical development, labor market development, material well-being, life conditions, education, healthcare, social environment, environmental problems, and financing HD. Each of them includes another different indexes, and what actually was the problem while doing these statistics, because everything here is calculated. You see, yes, it's not that good quality, but we have these numbers and we have these ranks. So from 1 to 27. And Each of these dimension has indices inside, but there is no data on this, so we just can use non-official statistics to analyze what is going on in labor market. So as you see, let's take Donetsk and Lugansk region. You see that material will be in it's on the 6th position and 4th. So it's one of the biggest actually in the country, but still the general HDI is on the bottom. Lugansk region, 6 out of 9 dimensions, they are just below the 20th position. The same actually, mostly the same in Donetsk, maybe with some difference with education and labor market. So you see that even the financing HD, it's 20th position maybe in Donetsk. So the question was where they actually, what they are financing. Because as I know, labor market development, almost 1/3 of vacancies on the labor market, they are just connected somehow with coal industry. And well, no one actually wants to go because it's really risky now with lots of previous bad issues that was there in the minings. Donetsk is really one of the main centers of education in Ukraine, but they produce another specialists which are go, for example, in Kiev or in Kharkiv region. Together with, for example, Lugansk and the Donetsk region, it's really bad social environment here because it's together with another one region, it's almost 1/3 of criminal issues that made in Ukraine. Environmental problems is really burning, and life conditions, it's still there is problems with water supply. I'm originally from there, and I know that we have just 4 hours in the morning and 4 hours in the evening of supply. People get used to this, but still it's not normal. Supply with gas, there is even no towns with no gas, and and also Donetsk and Zhytomyr, it's one of the biggest urbanized regions. It's more than 90% per square kilometer. So a little bit, not a little, another situation in Kirovograd and Zhytomyr region is the central one mostly, and there is one more time, Kirovograd and Zhytomyr. They are mostly urban, especially central one. And for example, what is interesting here is a very, maybe it seems like its labor market is well developed, but on the other hand, no one actually wants to go there. The government tried to attract investors there, but no one, because again the social system is really bad, and actually demographical, because here is really this burden only. There's actually no slice this economical active population. So we can talk a lot about this, but what is the main issue, that migration is really an indicator of human development, because no one wants to live if the life is good on this region. It can be just jobs, maybe education, but everyone, it's not this, and that means it's right. Everyone just prefer to stay where they were born. So there is some other, not maybe economical, maybe social, maybe environment. This is, I want to refer that, like you wrote, 3 pillars, so they have to be together: economical pillars, social, and environmental. And also disproportion in regional human development, disproportion in so, for example, you see that here is a huge disproportion, and it can cause really migration. So lots of people just move either from Lugansk to Russia, or mostly to Kharkiv. There is like very big numbers of indexes on labor market, social environment and ecological. So, for example, if in Kharkiv region the local government try to do the best to supply their people with everything they need, so next year, lots of people just migrate and make the situation worse. So it's just the same circle. And so this disproportion we have to avoid actually. And the last, so actually that's the point. So we, these three pillars that has to be like considered together while making this local policy or the policy producing on a national level. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you very much,
I'm
Elena.
going to answer from our...
Yes, I think you could take your seats and we will have discussion. And I would like to add my 2 cents from Moldovan case. That was quite a popular joke in Moldovan part of internet. It's Moldovan Romanian language, and it's mocking of wartime poster in United Kingdom, which was saying, "Keep calm and going on," which don't worry, move on. Sorry. And this poster say, and actually it's called the Farm of Moldova on the top. And it says everything is not normal. Go abroad, work, and send money back. I heard all these 4 presentations, and I had a lot of interesting points. And maybe we could structure our discussion. One thing which I heard, and it's a repeating point, that we have very big data on migration, and there are a lot of gray areas in measurement of migration. Who are migrants? Guy who is working 5 days, guy from South Moldovan village who are working 5 days in Ukraine, is he migrant or no? Guy who is going for 3 months to Moscow to work for construction, is he migrant or no? Second, what are good and bad things in migration? One thing I've heard a little bit, but I'm not sure it was actually quite well pronounced. Do migration lead to accumulation or destruction of human capital? Because if you are if you have higher education degree and you go to construction yard in Spain, is it accumulation of human capital or is destruction of human capital? Okay, but what if you bring from this Spanish construction yard new technologies which are not existing in Moldova, for instance? So all these things, and we put it more.
Yeah, I had very. First, I was enjoying very much. Thank you for this presentation. Making some notes, and the first idea, which just popped totally unexpected. Let's think about, for you, doing some additional work in finalizing those papers, so that they're really paper, we can publish them as part of this course on the internet, so that others can see them, and simply your work doesn't end just for the sake of submitting something for the course, but can be useful for you and for others. And in this spirit, my comments and questions will be try to be constructive and not too critical. So first of all, I was until the first Ukrainian paper, I was a little bit struck why we're talking only about outflow, but immigration, not immigration. And thank you for presenting. Yeah, thank you for bringing. So both Ukrainian presentations were very important in that regard. Migration has 2 types of implications. Both we are all countries. We are receiving countries and countries of origin. So in some cases, the outflow is stronger than the inflow, but it is never just this either or. So we should be very, very explicit in that regard. In the Armenian papers, I had a little bit of problems how we can relate the issues of the genocide, 1915, and so it was a little bit overstretching, I would say. So if you finalize in this paper, maybe I don't see why you need this introduction.
Like as a template to show demographic issue.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, okay. Fine. But I think the most important thing in this regard is to address directly the issue of diasporas, because Armenia is one of the countries in which this issue is extremely relevant, and it is not just related to the former Soviet Union era, which is another. Let me.
Yeah, I like that part because it tries to give the genesis, or if you like the historical background in terms of how people moved in that country. So if you can polish that aspect, it gives appetite even to reading the paper. So for me,
okay, you persuaded me, but just develop it further, exactly to address the issues of diasporas, how it is forming, what are the psychological, historical, cultural, trauma-related issues, and how this translates now into migration patterns, destinations, links to the diasporas, foreign direct investment, which is very much related to this and so on. So you either you take it out or you develop it, but anything else is just interesting. The second issue involved, actually in all the papers, I'm missing a little bit the analysis of migration and nation states. When I say it's not with criticism, because the paper is not supposed to be that in-depth, but I'm again saying this in the context of inviting you to develop them further. So if you are developing them further, think about this in this context, because you all mentioned the Soviet period and the migration within this former Soviet Union, which was totally different pattern. It was one big federal state which was pretending to be implementing different social engineering projects, establishing of a new kind of being, Sovietsky человек, and so on and so forth. So nominally the issue of nationhood was not there. Nationality was, but not nationhood. So, and with the collapse of the Soviet Union, all this changed overnight. Suddenly we had nation states with nation borders, with nation passports, and suddenly the people, the diasporas, or just just different nations and ethnicities, communities in the former Soviet Union space, suddenly overnight became foreigners. And it triggered a lot of processes, both in individual countries, but also later population exchanges back and forth. It's not just Russians who were living abroad, in quotes, beyond the borders of the Russian Federation, but also other nationalities and ethnic groups who were living in Russia, but somehow started belonging to different new re-established or established nation states. So it has very important implications both in the migration flows, targets, directions, and in terms of attitudes towards migrants, presence, employment, and so on. Another comment which I would perhaps put for your discussion is the issue of gains and losses, or the impact of the migration. To me, one obvious implication and one obvious impact is decreasing unemployment rates. Simply, usually the labor force, which is part of the labor force, migrates, and you mechanically decrease the denominator in calculating the value of the unemployment rate artificially. So you have lower number of people which nominally account for the labor force, because they keep being registered in the labor statistics in the countries which are not looking for job anymore in the country. So it has also political implications. So governments have a vested interest in promoting this outflow of redundant labor, and often report this as a success of their labor market policies. Which brings another issue. Is it actually that bad to have migration? Is it better to have the human capital in the countries, just hanging around without any kind of job, any interaction with anything, new cultures, new technologies? Thank you, by the way, for both Ukrainian papers bringing this. It's extremely important, this additional values exchange and bringing in new patterns of looking at the world outside and looking at ourselves in a different way when you have being exposed to different culture in different situations. So I think we tend to overestimate the issue of the brain drain and underestimate the benefits associated in the long run in terms of cultural change, in terms of tolerance, new technologies, everything which people usually bring in. And I would say that migration per se is not a problem. The problem is the inability of societies and governance structures to make best use of this migration flows. Not in terms of money remittances, because usually that's what the governments are obsessed by. You have remittances, balance of payments, boom. It is much more than that, and it is much more about this cultural and experience exposure.
And I have 2 points to it. One, balance of payment. I recently been to one conference in Moldova, and Guy was economic conference in Moldova, and Guy was very exciting because he told, look, typically countries with huge trade deficit show very low, if not negative, rates of growth. But Moldova is a wonderful country. We have huge trade deficit, something like 50% of GDP, but we have huge economic growth. And if we draw this line further, we will expect bright future, no problem. But when I asked him how you cover this trade deficit, it's covered by remittances. And these remittances are very unsustainable. If you look, because if you start looking on sustainability of especially Moldovan migration model, it is very unsustainable. On one hand, Moldova is aging society. So we have not so much young people, and we have a lot of older people. It's not Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan with huge fertility. No, well, look, frankly speaking, Tajikistan should export these people because they have a lot of people. No, purely demographically speaking, not taking into account other things. Second is economic sustainability of all these remittances. Third one is political. We already had problems with Russia blocking our wine and agricultural goods. If something happens and they start banning Moldovans to go to Russia, what happens with all these remittances? Well, Moldova was smart enough to diversify flows, because half of people go to Russia, half of people go to Italy. But Italy now in debt crisis. And Moldovans are employed in care economy, which will be hit by this debt crisis. Because people will have no money to employ Moldovan women to do house cleaning, and they start doing themselves.
Actually, this is debatable because maybe because of the crisis, the competitiveness of Moldovan migrants will be higher because they will be willing to work even for lower salary. Well, it's not that.
Okay, that's debatable, but it's point of concern.
Yeah, of course.
That's one thing.
But we live in an insecure world, so.
And second thing, I'm not finished. One more thing. One thing is politics, because migrants abroad is a huge power, which some politicians could mobilize and some politicians could not mobilize. And I remember voting in past elections in Moldova, and then votes in country and votes outside of countries were a little bit different. And attitude of people who are in country and who are outside of country are a little bit different. That could be of many reasons. One reason is that most active people go away because they see opportunities there, they go away, and those who stay in country are less entrepreneurial and so on and so forth. But politics is one of the huge points in migration. Okay, it was a question.
Yeah.
So the floor is yours.
I think listening to the 4 presentations, in my opinion, what I do not hear very much is the gender aspect of the migration. You've told us about how people move, so is it female or male dominated? I think it's also very important. And then the age brackets of the migrants, and even the seasonality. During which period do people migrate a lot from Ukraine or Armenia? Okay. And then there is one other important thing I think that we have to take into consideration. The 2 presentations from both countries have looked at the international aspect of migration. Based on my country's experience, that's Ghana, local people migrating within the country is equally important because it tells the policymakers about the inequality in terms of the economic the development. So I was thinking that in future, the presentation, one could look at the external aspect and then maybe the other one focuses on the local dynamics of migration. Because if I want to use my country's experience, the northern aspect where I come from, the young girls and the young boys, they move from there to the southern part because the southern part of my country is relatively advanced and there are more economic opportunities there. So the young ones move from there. And it's a very big macro issue for the states. So the local migration is very, very important. The last thing I would like to talk about is all the presenters have left me hanging. For example, they all talk about the positives and the negatives. None of them was bold enough to conclude that, well, for me, in terms of human development, I think that migration is good for Armenia or it's not good, and then what it means for the policymaker. I think that you talk about publishing these issues, the policymaker would be interested to know what kind of strategies or approaches that would be required, either reduce or encourage it, because there are situations you need to encourage it. It's not all that bad. It's not all that good. So it depends on the situation that we come from. I think this is what I want.
Thank you very much. I hope this policy aspect will be developed. Just one reminder, which I forgot. All presentations, all papers can benefit from more detailed analysis of exactly what could be the policy responses. Simple things like social insurance or pension insurance. Working in other countries, in which countries, with which countries the respective country is has regulated formally, so that pension contributions account for the future pension in those countries, or just work which is lost in terms of pension security, or social security in recipient countries. So health, access to health services, with very important gender dimensions as well. So there's a lot which you can develop further.
Can I just add something? Yeah, because if we are talking about internal migration within the country, no one ever gives you a statistic, because you just go and you will be checked, you will be seen in statistics if you buy a flat or a house and you have officially registered in this apartment. And another issue that just Andrei mentioned, that for example, if you move from east to west, whatever, and you registered in the east, and you are getting sick or some emergencies, in some really emergencies, you will be cured. But if you just have a headache constant, or you just want to make diagnosis, you have to pay. So it's really cause problems, because you go to, for example, to earn money, and then you just find out that you have to pay just to check yourself. So it's really a problem. Well, but you understand, in our case studies, everything was really detailed, so we just had no time.
Please.
Before making my comment, I would like to, because you mentioned the population of Armenia, can you repeat that?
It's 2 million.
Up to 3 million. So I would like to share my experience of Lithuanian case, which would be very close to Armenian case, because we also just a bit more than 3 million. And why they didn't mention immigrants into Armenia, that was mentioned by Ukraine. I'm not sure whether I'll be correct, but in my perspective and what I was observing in my country, actually the net migration index is so low that in comparison the people that go out and comparison what comes in, actually you see its percentage, it would be like, I think no more than 5%. And that's for small countries is a big, I wouldn't say big, it's a huge problem in terms of brain drain, in terms of loss of national state, in terms of losing our traditions, because we are not, how many millions now in Ukraine?
43.
43, and when you compare with 3 millions, you just get disappeared. And I wouldn't like to be pessimistic, but what we have estimations by sociologists and demographical research, that actually such countries as Lithuania are going to disappear as a national state and as nationality, let's call it. It might disappear in the next 200 years. So if you continue with the same migration rates, it I think it happened with Armenia, because the net migration in Lithuania is minus 23% index. So for such small countries, just like in your government, in my perspective.
I think there is an estimate that on average one native language per day is perishing globally. So you never know, maybe.
So I think we should make a difference between the forced migration and the migration on purpose when we choose it. In the case of Armenia, the genocide, it was forced migration. It's not on our, and they suffered a lot around the world, not only the region.
Actually, not,
That's it. And also the illegal migration, nobody mentioned it.
Well,
I think it's the most important thing for human development, the forced migration and the illegal one. The 2 points I think
Yes. Thank you for raising this. Actually, it's an interesting question. When we did this study in Moldova, we also looked on illegal migration. And what we find out that roughly 5-10% of Moldovan migrants are completely legal, which means they have all documentation, they have passport, visa, insurance, they have contract, and they go there. Around 10%, 5-10% is completely illegal. They fake passport, they find visa,
it's always illegal.
But biggest 80% are gray area. They're semi-legal. So, for instance, we don't have visa for Russia. So you simply take your passport and go to Russia. Tajiks could go with internal passport to Russia. But you have no contract, you have no insurance, you could be exploited, and this is huge gray area. And in my mind, it's the most problematic part. Because yes, clear, if it's forced migration, it's smuggling, it's relatively easy to fight. You need some measures and so on and so forth, but it's understandable. But with this gray area, it's very hard to fight. Why? Because there are a lot of incentives to keep it in gray area. In Russia, in Italy, those who use and abuse these people, it's very profitable for them because they pay less, they pay unofficially, and they get all the services, and it's good for them. On the other hand, it's created a lot of tensions. You most probably, I don't know if you followed, but there are a lot of tensions between migrants and local population in Russia. And in Russia, they have even movement against illegal immigration, which is kind of becoming more and more political party. and so on and so forth. So this gray area is, in my mind, the most important thing. And why it's important? Because it's also reduce human development outcomes of migration. Because we could expect good human development outcomes of migration. When you go, somebody told that migrants, returned migrants, are more tolerant, they more sensitive to cultural issues, they could bring new skills and so on and so forth. But if you exploit it,
no, I'm just laughing because I remember Michael was forwarding a few weeks ago a picture from the internet about group of people, and one is holding the poster, I am a migrant and I came here to take your job, but when I came, it turned out that you don't have a job. So, okay, you
No more questions.
Yes, please.
I'm curious whether, because no one discussed about the issue of technology and the technology adoption and migration.
You mean surveillance technology?
What?
Surveillance technology.
No, not surveillance technology. You could adopt a higher technology. For example, if you have women sweeping the streets as job creation and you import a road sweeper, will take out people's job and you create more employment, thereby creating more migration. Then the issue of migration and crime. Migration usually comes with drug trafficking, arms trade. For us, even in sub-Saharan Africa, even the issue of people that import for suicide bombing in northern Nigeria. Then also the issue of child slave, people that are taken to nearby cocoa plantation in West Africa. Do you have something similar in Moldova? And then the issue of the remittances. For our own experience in Africa, remittances is now the highest part of the private sources of funding. Remittance is much more, has grown past FDI and donor funding, and is much more stable because it has no conditions attached to it. So we encourage people to migrate. Then also part of the crime, I forgot to mention it, is the issue of prostitution. And there's a particular state in Nigeria, Edo, where people migrate to Italy based on prostitution. The husbands are where the wives are going. The parents transport their children and they come back, build houses for them. It's something that is now cultural. Then the issue of, you mentioned about the issue of forced migration. How does the forced migration, have been opportunity to hear a discussion about the issue of consumption of luxury goods and forced migration, and the Lebanon was used as a case study. That because of the issue of forced migration in Lebanon, Lebanese tend to consume more of luxury goods. They buy very expensive watches, very expensive jewelries, because this is things, whenever there is any issue, they can sell it at the border and move on. Then the issue of migration and food security, like the issue we have in Lower Sahara, the issue with the Tuaregs, is always about food and water. It makes them move from across Gambia to Sudan. And wherever they are moving, because they are stateless, there are issues with war. People keep on chasing them from one state to the other. And now with the loss of Libya, they don't have no one to take care of them. So I want to know if you have things like that in Europe.
Well, the short answer is no, we don't have exactly those issues for various reasons, because this region was, until recently, actually still now is not advanced. It's not comparable to sub-Saharan Africa. In some cases, we have minority issues like with the Roma population, in which some of the issues are comparable, but it is very minor, isolated cases, not systemic problem. The issues with prostitution, with trafficking, including trafficking of children and women, is of course an issue. But I don't think this is the major, of systemic nature determining the entire problem of migration. In our region, it is much more about labor, not food security, but labor security, and about employment opportunities and income. So this is driving mechanism behind it. Last call. Okay, two. You.
as our first mate mentioned about missing part, really I missed that part, to mention about gender. Gender usually migrates in Armenia. Actually, most of the migrants are male. Maybe it's first of all connected with national mentality, and usually a male go for labor. It is a labor migration, but sometimes we can also see female migrants who usually go to Persia to get work, or Arab Emirates. And also within domestic migration, of course, it exists in Armenia. Usually if you come to Armenia, our regions are not so developed. We don't have factories, and after our independence, many factories became private, but they don't work now. People bought it and they don't use it, and so even if someone else tries to buy, it must be reconstructed. And people have to move to capital, to Yerevan, because all of the employment opportunities are in the capital, and also all the students. Yeah.
The entire region, the model of growth is very much capital center.
So, and students, usually the biggest universities are in the capital, so we have that domestic migration in Armenia.
Yeah, just a few comments actually. The first of all, I like this too about Lithuania and Armenia. The issue about 3 million people. I spent 1 year in Denmark, and actually they had a very opposite impression. Like there are 5 million, and they are afraid that in a few years there will be more immigrants than actually people who are out from Denmark. Yes, so because there are so many immigrants who are coming to Denmark. But actually I want to talk about something different. I'm from Poland, so actually Polish people are all over the world, and I want and actually West countries are tired of Polish workers, but I want to say something about positive aspects of immigration. The first of all is also the exchange of ideas about, and for example, I'm not sure if the transition would be possible without the immigration. For example, all of our writers, the most important writers, poets, and so on, they actually worked abroad, and then they just sent the ideas to Polish people. The second aspect is this financial support. We've been receiving a lot of money from people who work abroad. The same is with Africa. All the people from Africa I met, they actually sent half or even a lot. Some part of salary to Africa, yes. So actually, this is the other point, like the development assistance, which is actually sending to the families directly in Africa. And so actually, the question is actually how to find a solution. And then one more point about this immigrants who go to abroad and there is actually no job anymore. Yes. That's why Poland didn't experience actually crisis, because there are so many workers abroad. And when they become unemployed, they just took their savings, come back to Poland, started to run out their own businesses. And in 2009, 2010, a lot of new small businesses, small companies opened and started work.
Actually, here I would tend to disagree, because the Polish story is much more complex and more interesting. The reason, in my view, sorry to interrupt, but I think the reason, in my view, why Poland did not have a crisis is rooted in the 60s and the 70s, when Poland was the only country in the former Soviet bloc, socialist camp, which was able to retain a very vivid private sector in the economy. The entire agricultural production was private, and it had very strong, you were calling it rzemieślnictwo, craftsmanships, but it was a legal protection, legal window for private entrepreneurship in non-agricultural goods. And in fact, there was no 1 or 2 generations lost in terms of acquaintance and experience with private entrepreneurship, which was the case in all the other former socialist countries. And when the transition came, actually, oh my God, what's going on? who is taking care of us, our state is collapsing, but it was not the case of Poland. It was a kind of much more small start. And to a certain extent it was the case of Hungary as well. So it's not just migrants who were abroad and brought savings.
Yes, of course, but still it's also
there was a culture of
we should maybe look for some solution which convince people to come back, yes? Because, for example, Denmark haven't been rich forever, yes? They actually, some decades ago, they were really poor and they struggling with also some crises. So within those short period of time, they become really rich. So I think that's the way how we should act, maybe not complain because of the emigration, yes?
Anyway, they returned because of bad situation on labor market in the country they worked before.
But some of them just come back because now they feel that they can work in Poland as well. Yes, so because they feel that actually they can.
Relevant points. Why we have this discussion today on the migration? Because it's very much related to all the topics which we discussed in the morning. It's about political systems. It's about ways of integrating different segments of the society and issue of representation. It's about nation state reformulation and the link between nation states and nationhood, nationality. Because in the European Union, you have this problem again re-emerging. I mean, we are again being divided into Germans, Spaniards, but in fact it is very artificial because when you go to Germany, there are different types of Germans with different ethnic backgrounds, culture and so on. So it's this re-emergence of ethnically driven or nationality-driven nation states. It's very risky, but the way of dealing with the issue of migration is exactly dealing it, addressing it in the context of new functions and new forms. We should redefine the nation state issue. That's why I raised this point at the beginning. Last comment, last question. Last two.
There are two aspects of migration that I guess haven't been mentioned. I'm glad Dina mentioned forced migration. Climate change is strongly contributing to forced migration. And over time, we can see much more of this coming. And the second aspect is heavy urbanization. Migration will accelerate actually this urbanization process, which is anyway going on very strongly in the world.
Yes, thank you, Krista. Climate change, of course, we should be much more careful about this. Exactly, climate change and the climate-induced risks will be actually, if we are correct in our estimates, an issue in the next 15-20 years can be just rising the ocean levels, and you can count the number of people who should be somehow have to be resettled because of this, at least that. But it's not just that, it's increasing volatility in climate conditions which are... Okay, you will last comment today.
First of all, thanks a lot to the presenters for their presentations, very informative. And my question or comment is regarding the impact of migration on education and on upbringing of children. Because I've spent some time in Ukraine, and I've gone. There was a tour of villages in Western Ukraine in particular, and what I've observed was that most of the time there were only the elderly people with small children, with parents gone, working in Italy or somewhere else. So what the effect was that children lacked the necessary parental education or support, teaching, so to say. And as a result, some people even told these children as lost generation, those that might then be more conducive to alcohol or drug abuse because there is no much parental control. And so for me, I think that's one of the biggest challenges, right? You go abroad, you make money, but then what is the longer term effect on your kids who are left without some control and proper upbringing. So for me, it would be, if you intend to publish your works and if you're interested in this issue, it would be great to see, to track the development of this issue and see what can be done to avoid, having short-term positive impact, with this.
Exactly. This is actually a good example of the human development implications of migration because they are different from economic. And that's why we were talking about sustainable human development, not sustainable economic growth. Because economically it can be nice, you have remittances, you have income, blah blah blah. But the human cost of this can be huge, and very relevant point. I think it's also particularly the case of Moldova. This family impact.
Social.
Children, so
very shortly, in Lithuania, when they are making now promotions and incentives for and social like advertisements for people to come back, is actually the same. I've seen one picture in our actual media and internet, and it was exactly the picture. Grandpa or grandparents with the small children, and it was written, "Mom, Dad, come back, I'm missing you," or something like this. So it was exactly the same countryside dressing, but I think that address is not really enough.
It was just right after, maybe till 1995, 1997. It was quite alarming. Now it's not a bit.
On Moldova and family and all this last comment. I promise.
The 8th last comment.
Okay. On Moldova, on these family roles, we did a study because at some point of time in 2006 we were very worried about consequences of migration. At that time, government of Moldova was communist government. They saw plus 6% or 7% growth. It was wonderful. We did National Human Development Report, which was very welcomed, but everybody was scared. And it had no signature of Ministry of Economy on it, but it was distributed inside of Ministry of Economy, and you could see direct quotations from this report in National Development Plan, which basically, that report basically said, guys, we have plus 7%, 8% growth, but it's not equal, it's not sustainable, and so on and so forth. After that, we start looking on migration, and on economic side of migration, it was very clear. Remittances, boom, high. But what happens on social side of migration? And we did a study on families, including some study of gender aspects. We simply asked families with migrants, without migrants, who is doing things at home, like who is earning money, who cooking, who going with children to hospital, who educating them, who control them during their free time. And what we get that migration seriously change roles in family, which is expectable. Second, we got that migration of mother, and in Moldova we have roughly 50% of migrants are women, roughly 50% of migrants are men. So it's not case like in other countries when only men move and stay at home. And migration of mothers have much more significant impact on families than migration of fathers. But what was very worrying that we also looked on lost roles. So we had an option that nobody take care of this role, right? And in case of migrant mothers, for instance, they lost in 15% of families, they lost role, take children to the doctor. And it's very worrying because you could invest a lot of money into hospitals and doctors, but if you have nobody who brings these kids to the doctor, you have huge access issue. And now UNICEF is very worried about access to schools, but I think it's a little bit artificial thing because they take enrollment figures from Ministry of Education, but take population figures from forecasts, which doesn't take into account migration. And they see huge dropout in enrollment rates. But yes, it's very important to see also on family. That's
Thank you. Additional few ideas for look at the data families. It's important. I'm not joking. The data sources based on what sources of data are the estimates, because the issue of UNICEF, we're having the different sources of data and indicators are by definition flawed. We had for today initially envisaged